The rain hammered down on Route 191 as Michael drove through the Arizona desert at 2 a.m. His windshield wipers struggled against the downpour, and visibility had dropped to almost nothing. He was exhausted from a double shift at the hospital in Tucson and still had 2 hours of driving ahead. A figure appeared in his headlights, standing on the shoulder with an outstretched thumb. Michael's foot moved toward the brake pedal instinctively, though every fiber of his being screamed to keep driving. But he was a nurse, conditioned to help people, and leaving someone stranded in this weather felt wrong. The hitchhiker was a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing a sundress completely inappropriate for the cold desert rain. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and she carried no bag, no jacket, nothing. Michael unlocked the passenger door, and she climbed in without a word, bringing with her a smell like stagnant water and decay. "Thanks," she said simply, staring straight ahead. Michael pulled back onto the empty highway. "Where are you heading?" "Home. Just keep driving straight." Something felt off. Her clothes weren't just wet. They looked old-fashioned, like something from the 1970s. Her skin had an odd pallor, even in the dim dashboard light, and she hadn't shivered once despite being soaked through. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Michael kept glancing at her, but she never moved, never blinked, just stared at the road ahead with glassy eyes. He tried to make conversation several times, but she only gave one-word answers or none at all. Then she spoke without prompting. "There was an accident. Right up here. Long time ago." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What kind of accident?" She turned to look at him for the first time, and her eyes were completely black, reflecting nothing. "A girl died. She was going home." The temperature in the car plummeted. Michael could see his breath now, and frost began forming on the inside of the windows. His heart hammered as he pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to reach the next town. The next gas station, anywhere with people and lights? "This is where it happened," she whispered. Michael looked at the road ahead and saw the twisted metal of guardrails where a car had obviously broken through years ago. The section had never been properly repaired, just left as a grim reminder. When he looked back at the passenger seat, it was empty. Completely empty, with no watermarks on the upholstery. No sign anyone had been there at all. But the smell remained, and the temperature was still freezing. He didn't stop driving until he reached Flagstaff as the sun came up. At a diner, he told the waitress what had happened, and her face went pale. She disappeared into the back and returned with a laminated newspaper clipping from 1976. The photo showed a young woman in a sundress, the same woman who had been in his car. She had died in a single-vehicle accident on Route 191 during a freak rainstorm, her body found 50 feet from the wreckage. The article mentioned she had been trying to get home after a fight with her boyfriend. "People see her every few years," the waitress said quietly. "Always on rainy nights. Always trying to get home." Michael never drove Route 191 at night again. Jennifer pulled into the rest stop on Interstate 40 in New Mexico at midnight, cursing herself for not filling up in Albuquerque. Her fuel light had been on for 20 miles, and this decrepit rest area was her only option before risking running out of gas completely. The parking lot was empty except for one semi-truck on the far end, its running lights off. The bathrooms were in a concrete building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. Jennifer locked her car and hurried toward the restrooms, keys gripped between her fingers. The women's room door creaked open, revealing cracked tiles and graffiti-covered walls. She chose the stall farthest from the entrance and locked it, trying to ignore the way the lights kept flickering. That's when she heard the footsteps. Heavy boots on the tile floor, moving slowly, deliberately. They stopped right outside her stall. Jennifer held her breath, staring at the gap beneath the door. 2 feet stood there, motionless, in work boots caked with something dark. She waited for the person to use another stall or leave, but they just stood there, watching. A full minute passed. Then another. The feet didn't move. Jennifer's phone was in her car. She was alone in this rest stop with whoever this was. Her mind raced through options, all of them bad. She could hear breathing now, low and raspy, just on the other side of the thin metal door. Then a voice, barely above a whisper, "I can wait all night." Terror shot through her. She made a decision. Standing on the toilet, she grabbed the top of the stall and hauled herself up, ignoring the pain in her arms. She swung one leg over, then the other, dropping into the adjacent stall as quietly as possible. The boots moved instantly, tracking her movement. They appeared under the new stall. How had he moved so fast? Jennifer repeated the process, moving from stall to stall toward the exit. Each time, the boots followed, always stopping right outside wherever she landed, as if the person knew exactly where she would go. She reached the last stall nearest the door. This was it. She burst out and ran for the exit, not looking back. The footsteps thundered behind her, close enough that she could feel them, but she didn't turn around. She hit the bathroom door at full speed and sprinted across the parking lot. Jennifer fumbled with her keys, hands shaking so badly she could barely get them in the lock. The footsteps were getting closer. She could hear him breathing, panting. She wrenched the door open and threw herself inside, slamming the locks down. A face appeared at her window. A man in his 40s, completely ordinary looking except for the emptiness in his eyes. He smiled slowly and pointed at her back tire. Jennifer looked. It was completely flat, slashed open. She hadn't noticed in her panic. She couldn't drive anywhere. Her phone showed no service. The nearest town was 15 miles away. The man walked around to the front of her car and sat down on the hood, still smiling, clearly prepared to wait. The semi-truck at the far end of the lot suddenly started up, and Jennifer realized with horror that it was his. He had been here all along, waiting for someone to stop. Jennifer held down the horn, blasting it continuously into the empty desert night, praying that someone, anyone, would hear and come to investigate. The man just sat there, patient, that terrible smile, never wavering. After 30 minutes, a highway patrol car pulled in, responding to reports of sustained horn noise. The man was gone, the semi was gone, but Jennifer's tire was still slashed, and scratched into the dust on her hood were the words, "Next time." The officer said rest stop attacks had been reported along this stretch for years, but they'd never caught anyone. Jennifer was the lucky one. 3 women had vanished from rest stops on I-40 in the past decade, their cars found abandoned with slashed tires and no sign of a struggle beyond that. Jennifer never traveled alone at night again. David's GPS died somewhere in rural Montana, leaving him on a network of unmarked dirt roads as darkness fell. He'd been trying to reach his sister's ranch outside of Miles City, but had taken what he thought was a shortcut hours ago. Now he was hopelessly lost, his fuel gauge dropping toward empty, and his phone showing no signal. The road ahead forked. Both options looked equally desolate, cutting through prairie grassland that stretched endlessly in every direction. He chose left arbitrarily and continued driving. 20 minutes later, he saw lights. A wave of relief washed over him until he got closer and realized it was just a single farmhouse, isolated and run down, its porch light barely fighting back the darkness. But it was civilization, and maybe they could give him directions. David pulled into the dirt driveway and stepped out. The silence was absolute. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Even his footsteps seemed muffled as he approached the sagging porch. He knocked on the weathered door. It swung open at his touch, revealing a dimly lit interior. David called out but received no answer. Against his better judgment, he stepped inside. The house looked lived, in fresh dishes in the sink, a TV playing static, a coffee cup still steaming on the table, but no people. Then he saw the photographs on the wall. Dozens of them, all showing the same thing. Different people standing in front of different cars in the very driveway where he'd just parked. Different decades based on the clothing and vehicles, but always the same confused, lost expression on their faces. The photos looked like they'd been taken without the subject's knowledge. David backed toward the door and collided with something solid. He spun around to find a man standing there, tall and rail-thin, holding an old camera. The man said nothing, just raised the camera to his eye. The flash went off, blinding David. When his vision cleared, he was outside, standing next to his car, and the man was gone. The house was completely dark now, as if no one had been there for years. The porch light was off. David ran to his car and tore out of the driveway, not caring which direction he went. He drove for 2 hours on fumes before finally hitting a paved road he recognized. He made it to his sister's ranch just after midnight, pulling in on an empty tank. He told her what happened, but she just looked concerned and suggested he was overtired from the drive. Montana had a lot of abandoned homesteads, she explained. His mind probably played tricks on him. He must have dozed off and dreamed the whole thing. David wanted to believe her until he checked his phone the next morning. There was a new photo in his gallery, one he hadn't taken. It showed him standing in front of his car in that driveway, looking confused and lost, taken from the porch of that house. And in the reflection of his car window, barely visible, was the tall, thin figure of the man with the camera. David tried to find the location again using satellite maps, but the farmhouse didn't exist on any map or image. That entire network of dirt roads didn't appear anywhere he looked. It was as if the whole area simply wasn't there. But every few months, a new photo appears on his phone. Different people, different cars, same driveway, same terrified expression. And one day, he knows, there will be another photo of him. Patricia was driving through West Texas on Highway 385 when she noticed the headlights behind her. It was 3 a.m., and she'd been alone on the road for over an hour, so the appearance of another vehicle was almost comforting, almost. The vehicle matched her speed exactly, staying about 50 yards back. When she accelerated, it accelerated. When she slowed down, it slowed down. She told herself it was coincidence, just another driver heading the same direction, but unease crept down her spine. Then she saw the second set of headlights. They appeared from a side road she hadn't even noticed, falling into line behind the first vehicle. Then a third. Then a fourth. Within 10 minutes, there were 8 vehicles following her in a perfect single-file line, maintaining exact spacing. Patricia's hands started shaking. This wasn't normal traffic. The vehicles behind her were all different. Pickup trucks, sedans, even an old van. But they moved with eerie coordination like a single organism. She tried slowing to 40 miles per hour. The convoy matched her speed. She accelerated to 80. They stayed with her, never getting closer, never falling back. The road ahead was straight and empty, no towns for another 60 miles. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but some instinct made her pick up. A woman's voice, frantic and breathless. Whatever you do, don't stop. Don't pull over. Just keep driving. Who is this? Patricia demanded. I was where you are 3 months ago. They followed me for 2 hours. I stopped for gas and The line went dead. Patricia's fuel gauge read just under half a tank. She had enough to make it to the next town if she could just keep going. But the convoy behind her seemed to sense her plan. The lead vehicle suddenly accelerated, pulling up alongside her. Patricia looked over and her blood ran cold. The driver was wearing a burlap sack over their head with crude eye holes cut out. They turned to look at her, and even through the sack, she could feel the intensity of their stare. The passenger was similarly masked. The vehicle swerved toward her, forcing her toward the shoulder. She jerked the wheel right, nearly losing control. The masked driver fell back into line, and another vehicle from the convoy moved up on her other side. This driver was also masked, as was their passenger. They were hurting her, boxing her in, playing with her. Each vehicle would take turns pulling alongside, forcing her to swerve, then falling back. She couldn't outrun them, couldn't escape. Her phone rang again. Same unknown number. The voice was different this time, male, older. They're testing you. They do this to people on empty highways. If you stop, you disappear. If you run out of gas, you disappear. Keep driving until you reach light, people, anything. Don't acknowledge them. Don't respond. How do you know this? Patricia shouted into the phone. Because I'm in the car behind you. Third vehicle back? They got my wife. I've been following them ever since, trying to warn people. When you see the lights of a town, floor it. Don't look back. I'll try to block them. The line went dead again. Patricia looked in her rearview mirror, trying to figure out which vehicle held her mysterious ally, but they all looked equally menacing in the darkness. 45 minutes passed. The convoy never wavered. Then, finally, she saw them, lights on the horizon. The small town of Marathon, Texas. Patricia had never been so grateful to see civilization. She accelerated gradually, not wanting to spook the convoy. 60 miles per hour, 70, 80, the town lights grew closer. She could see the glow of a 24-hour gas station. Then she floored it, pushing her sedan to 95 miles per hour. The convoy erupted behind her, all 8 vehicles accelerating in unison. But suddenly, one vehicle swerved sideways, blocking the highway. The convoy crashed into it in a chain, reaction of screeching, metal and shattered glass. Patricia didn't look back. She rocketed into Marathon and pulled into the gas station, running inside and screaming for help. The police arrived 20 minutes later and drove out to investigate. They found nothing. No accident, no vehicles, no debris. Just an empty highway and skid marks that disappeared into nowhere. But they believed Patricia enough to escort her the rest of the way through Texas. She later searched for information about Highway 385 and found scattered reports going back decades. People followed by mysterious convoys. Some made it to safety like she did. Others simply vanished, their cars found abandoned on the roadside. Doors open, keys in the ignition, no sign of struggle. Patricia received one final call a week later. The same male voice. You made it. Most don't. They're still out there, still hunting. Warn others if you can. Then the line went dead, and the number was disconnected. She sold her car the next day and refuses to drive through West Texas ever again.